Achill Rudolph in the house. How's it going, man?
Rock and roll, Aditya. Thanks for having me.
Nice, nice. So for those of you who don't, know you among the audience, could you go ahead and give us a quick 1 minute background about yourself, who you are, what you do? Because it's hard to put you in a box. So
Yeah.
tell me more about yourself.
Yeah, I'm a social confidence coach primarily, and I focus on helping men with the South Asian background who live abroad, who live in the West, navigate the complexities of modern dating and, in general, building social confidence. I had this problem myself that I didn't really know how to navigate that space as an half Indian growing up in Germany. There was still enough Indian culture in me to prevent me from really participating in the social life for a long time. And I figured out how to overcome that for myself and get more socially acclimatized and expressive and learn how to really connect with people here. And that was a big challenge for me to overcome. And I wanted to just make this accessible to more people who had similar problems. And yeah, rapidly found a lot of people who had that problem and started building products for them. At first, I started building a technology. So I was a software engineer before that and started building apps around this topic. And then it transitioned into a coaching model. So now I'm coaching people in small groups or one-on-one.
That's really cool. One of the first things that I kind of noticed about you is I'm personally on this podcast. I'm very keen on speaking to people of the Indian diaspora to see what, someone's life is like as like a Indian American, maybe like an Indian German, things like that. So um, I want to take it back a little bit before we talk more about what you do right now. So, growing up in Germany as somebody from an Indian background, um, what were kind of some of the cultural differences that you faced? And could you give us like a description of the general Indian community that is there right now? Because in the Middle East is like a different kind of Indian community, their background, whatever they do, things like that. In the US is a little different. Europe, it's a little different. Could you paint a picture of what it was like growing up, what you kind of saw?
Yeah, that's a great question, Aditya. Because I think I had a kind of quite unique experience, Indian abroad experience, living especially as a half Indian in Berlin. There was actually not a lot of people around me who had a comparable situation. I I couldn't really fully relate to the Indians who were Indian on both sides of their parents, because oftentimes they were just very much connected to their Indian roots. And I was a bit split, and my father is German, my mother is Indian. And so there was hardly anyone else I could see as a role model in that situation. There were no other half Indians in my school. There was not even an Indian in my school, for that matter.
Yeah.
So I was kind of put together a lot with just immigrants in general. I was just a brown kid. And in my area, that kind of meant Arab, Turkish. But of course, I had nothing to do with that as well. So I felt a bit isolated and lonely in that time. And that was not necessarily a very bad thing because it helped me just focus on my studies, which is what my parents also wanted for me, and I think which was also a great thing for me. But it did mean that I just spent more time on my own, studying, getting good at solving academic problems that rising in the ivory tower of academics.
Hmm.
And only very late in life, like around second half of my 20s, did I start connecting to my Indian roots more and owning them. Before that, it was more something that my mother just kind of pushed onto me, and I didn't really fully understand it.
Hmm.
There was a big problem, which was that when I went to India or when I saw myself as an Indian and I was like trying to be Indian, I was not fully accepted as an Indian because obviously I didn't understand the intricacies, all the subtle elements of Indian culture. And so when I was doing what I was supposed to be, which is being Indian, I messed up sometimes and I broke the rule here and there, and I I got some traumatic experiences because of that. And
Mm,
then when I tried to be German, obviously I also didn't really fully fit in there. So I was in between those two chairs, and
mm,
that felt uh I can't even say lonely. It felt like deserted. I'm not part of any group.
mm.
And that's painful when when you're like, especially growing up and have a lot of other uncertainties in life, and you don't really know how to just figure out what to even do in life. And then you look around and you feel like, shit, I'm not even part of any group. It gave me a lot of freedom though, because I thought, okay, I'm not part of any group. I don't have to really adhere to any group standards and norms. I can do my own thing. And that strengthened my critical, independent thought.
That makes sense. I'm curious actually to like know more about maybe like background in terms of what part of India your family's from, and also what languages do you kind of speak? Because I'm like a big language enthusiast, so I always like to see people who, speak multiple languages, which I'm sure might be the case. What are the languages that you can speak and how well, I guess?
Yeah. My mother is from Jammu and Kashmir,
Hmm.
from real border between Jammu and Kashmir, the mountains in between, the mountains surrounding the Kashmir Valley, really, but more on the Jammu side. So they speak a dialect of Dogri
Hmm.
and called Badarwa. And there's a tiny, tiny valley there, really, where this language is spoken. But that was a very big influence in my youth. I heard it, but it is still a very remote dialect. So I didn't learn that. I learned Hindi more.
Hmm.
However, even Hindi, I didn't learn very well growing up because my mother, soon after she moved here to Germany, started speaking German to me. She was the only Indian representative surrounded by a German environment.
Yeah.
And so I didn't learn Hindi until I turned around 23 and finished my undergrad studies. And then I went to India again and lived there for a few years because I felt I needed to learn Hindi properly. And I felt like I needed to understand the Indian culture better. So that's when I moved to Bihar and did some research for a research company there and learned Hindi better. And still, I would say I'm not absolutely fluent, but I understand everything in the streets, let's say.
Wow. Said you said India, and then you said directly I went to Bihar to do like a research study. Dude, that must have been wild, bro. Like, what was that even like? Did you just take that decision? I'm gonna go to Bihar right now.
Yeah, I was clueless after studying economics
Hmm.
what to do, but I was lucky to be in a really good university in the US. I studied at Harvard. My last year of undergrad, I did it as a visiting student at Harvard, and they
Hmm.
had a lot of great career advice people there. So I talked to them and they told me, hey, there's this research lab at MIT
Hmm.
and they need assistants to run surveys in the field. And I was like, this is my dream job. I want to be in India. I like that adventure of being out in the villages, getting a more visceral feel for what it means to really do research and also what it means to be an Indian. And
Mm.
they just told me, yeah, this might be it. And I looked at it, the job description. The job description said you need to be able to ride a motorcycle. And I was like, this is my job. I want that.
Are you able
So
to ride a motorcycle?
I think I didn't even have a license, but I had done it before, and
Uh-huh.
I knew that I was gonna learn this. And so one of the first things I did over there was to get a Royal Enfield Bullet and live that life, of just
Sir.
riding around in the villages, going from one station to the other, supervising a research team, also doing quite a lot of heavy empirical research work. But yeah, the main thing was for me just to explore India with my own eyes rather than through the eyes of my mother, who had always brought me to that very middle class, very orderly family life. And until then, that was my conception of India. And so I had to choose that other side, the dark side of India. And Bihar was a place like that, where my family told me never to go.
Hmm.
And no one even had a conception of what it is like to be there. And everyone I talk to even now says, what, you went to Bihar? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And that was the right place for me to get my own image of India and get the completed image of India. And then I started traveling around from there, moved around a bit, moved to Jaipur, moved to Delhi, moved to Ahmedabad, so covered the north pretty well.
Man, here I was thinking like I might have to explain some like aspects of Indian culture, things like that. Dude, you're good, bro. You gotta tell me more about Bhojpuri and stuff like that, dude. But dude, that's a really cool experience because I find it funny when you said when they said like you have to learn how to ride a motorcycle or you just have to know. You're like if you're Indian, gotta know how to ride a motorcycle. And that's funny because I don't know where in me, but a couple of years back, I was like, I really want a motorcycle. And my dad was just like, "Are you sure? Like, what made you want to get it?" And I was like, "I don't know. I think it's in my blood." And then my dad was like, "All right, man. All right." And a lot of people ask me, they're just like, "Dude, like, do you know how to ride?" Like, because motorcycles in America, right, compared to the rest of the world, they're very like niche. I don't know how to describe it. It's very much like imagine like a big burly guy riding like a Harley Davidson. He's like, "Hello, man. How's it going?" Like that kind of a very masculine thing to do. And somebody who's like a little bit more of a skinny build like me would not be riding a motorcycle like that. But I was like, I need to buy one. But it's a cool story. So it's basically now that you said it, MIT said it that if you're Indian, you got to ride a motorcycle.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I had two accidents after a couple of months of owning that.
Hmm.
One crushed my ankle. The other one
Ooh.
had me basically topple over after getting run over by a bus, almost got my leg rolled over. But after that, I just said, okay, probably this is just something I'll do in India for a couple of more months, and then I'll never ride a motorcycle again. And that's what happened eventually.
Oh.
I'll never mount a motorcycle again.
Dude, that's wild. But you're riding in Bihar though, so I'll give you some credit. Probably way safer like anywhere else. But yeah, so speaking of I guess being raised in a traditional like very kind of like traditional Indian cultured household, I'm pretty sure like education was like a huge aspect, right? So you were kind of pushed to maybe go into like academics or lean into that more because that's like a value that is it's a highly respected value in the Indian community. And so you made your parents proud. You went down the engineer path. And so could you kind of talk about a little bit more of the tech side of things? Because I saw your website and I thought it was kind of cool. I saw some of the projects that you had mentioned on there. Maybe this was a long time ago. I don't know if you remember them, but I was just gonna ask, like, what was the project with the social media, decentralized social media? I wanted to
Mm.
ask more about that.
Oh yeah. So you have to know, Aditya, I took quite a few turns before becoming an engineer. And the first impulse from my parents was certainly to push me into technical fields and engineering and research. And after school, I mean, even in the last year of school, it became clear that that was not my path. Initially, I was like, no, I'm much more interested in just you know, liberal arts, understanding the world,
Hmm.
philosophy. And I settled on philosophy and economics. That was my undergrad degree. And I studied that, tried to understand the world, especially tried to understand poverty, because I was like, this is the biggest problem in the world. Why are some people so miserably poor? I wanna help solve that. And they respected that. They really respected that, especially because even with economics, you do have a good chance of getting into the more respectable administrative careers. And that was my plan back then. That was my compromise in a way. But after some time of studying that, I realized that I'm not the kind of person who's going to make a huge breakthrough when it comes to researching social science. And that was not my métier, that was not my strength. So I started thinking about the other things that I could potentially do. And one of them was entrepreneurship, but there was also another one, which was filmmaking. And so those two conflicted, and I said, I'm going to try both of them. I'll just give it a shot. I started with filmmaking because it seemed even more fun and creative. So made a lot of documentary movies. and some of them were good. Some of them I'm still releasing them on my YouTube channel every now and then. But eventually I realized that there was no money to be made with that, and I didn't want to even make money with it. That was more like a creative pursuit. So that's how I ended up in entrepreneurship, because there were certain problems that I saw in my life and in everyone around me, and I thought I could potentially help solve some of these problems. And one problem that I was obsessed with from a very early age was the problem of lack of communication between strangers. When you live in a big city, there's a lot of people and they're very closely surrounded by each other almost all the time, but hardly anyone really interacts with strangers. And I felt that is a big potential that we're wasting. And I realized this in the dating context because dating apps didn't work for me. So I started actually exploring that potential and saying, hey, I'm gonna connect with strangers that I find attractive. And it worked really well for me. I mean, after a few years of doing this, didn't even think about installing a dating app anymore because I could just meet people anywhere all the time.
Mhm.
And that's how I ended up in tech, because I thought this is a problem that should be solved. And the way I can solve it, I thought at that time, was building technology that enables strangers to interact more and trust each other more. And so I started building apps around this. The first app I built was a lunch meetup app. Okay. It's just for people who work in a certain area. They can basically publish their lunchtime, and then other people who work in that area can join for lunch. I was bored at that time of my lunch partners. I was working in Berlin in a small company and was always working with the same people, always eating with the same people. It got boring. So I thought I want to just make it known that people can join my lunch time. And I made this small website. I didn't really know coding at the time, right? I had no background in tech, but
Yeah.
I went to a hackathon and met some people and learned how to build this kind of basic website. And that project got a little bit of publicity. Like in my area, suddenly people knew about me and they started joining me for lunch break. And I just met interesting people that were really inspiring. And some of them were already further along on the entrepreneurial path. So they inspired me to keep digging. And I started building more and more projects in that direction. And at some point, the crypto boom came along. And I thought this should be something I integrate into my solution. How would it be if everyone had a public profile on a crypto network, which also signals their interests and values? And at that time, those very innovative use cases for cryptocurrencies were coming up. And one use case was so-called non-fungible tokens, but also there was actually fungible tokens that didn't really have any necessarily financial value, but more like a mimetic value, right? You had these coins that just identified you as someone being interested in a certain community or being part of a community.
Yeah.
And so the ultimate conclusion of that model is for every person to have their own personal cryptocurrency. And I found that interesting because it would mesh well with my social project of connecting people. If everyone had a currency, then I could now maybe buy some of yours or get some of your Aditya coins as my sign or as my token of allegiance with Aditya Cooper, or as my proof that I have interacted with Aditya Cooper. So I was exploring these kinds of use cases, and very quickly, I mean, you get to that problem that there's no liquidity for a token that isn't really used much because it's bound to one single person. So I started building or adapting protocols that allow you to automatically and limitlessly create liquidity for a token by having an automated market maker, which is basically a smart contract that spits out token and can also buy token at any time. So there were some weird ass projects in that time where we just explored and nothing ever came out of it, to be honest. We had a few proposals from investors, but they all backed out. All of that collapsed. And so here I was then, almost reaching my 30s with some wild entrepreneurial dreams, but none of them had worked out. But I had acquired the programming skills in the meantime. And so
Mm.
natural thing for me to do then was to actually transition into a regular software engineering career. And that's what I did for a few years.
So you didn't choose the engineering path. The engineering path chose you.
Yes, exactly. And the worst part is that Like, for example, my Indian relatives, they
Mhm.
wouldn't even accept someone like that as an engineer because I didn't study that. I didn't choose to be an engineer. It just kind of happened because I wanted to solve entrepreneurial problems.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, "What? You call yourself a software engineer? You can't do that." And I'm like, "That's not a protected title. Okay, I
Uh-huh.
can if I write software. I'm a software engineer."
Yeah, dude, it's a changing world, you know. Nowadays a lot of people they you don't really need a degree to go into a career. You just have the skills and you just go through. And I feel like everybody's gonna slowly pick up on that because even any master's degree, undergrad, doesn't really matter to be honest if you have the skill set, I feel like.
Absolutely. I mean, it was so easy for me to get a job in tech. I mean, I still had to write a few applications, but
Hmm.
it's because I had built software
Mm,
was running that was up on the internet, I had a huge advantage over many other applicants who had done masters and half of a PhD, and they could talk and talk, but I just showed them what I had built, and they said, "Okay, we want you, and
yeah,
tell us what kind of salary you want." I mean, that's a big advice also to anyone who's applying for jobs in tech right now. Build something that actually works, that is up and running. I mean, it's not so difficult to get an app on the App Store. It's really
yeah,
not so difficult. Just
yeah.
do that and that'll make you stand out.
Makes sense, man. You know, it's been a cool, interesting journey that you took me through because I saw your website, akilrudolph.com, and I was just going through it and I was like, damn, man, like there's way more to the background of Akil than what shows in Instagram. So I wanted to kind of like dive into that a little bit. But now I want to pivot a little bit and speak about more on what you're doing right now. So, dating. How did you get into the business of dating and what made you kind of start it? And I know you mentioned a little bit about helping people connect and stuff, but more specifically, helping Indians abroad, helping them date. And what's with the no alcohol and no apps? I want to
Mhm.
hear about this.
Yes. So, as you know, I was interested in connection in general and starting to explore that in my own 20s and realized that it's a huge skill to have. And the most value I got from it was in that area of dating. I mean, you can learn a lot from random conversations. I had a lot of amazing random conversations and I met a lot of beautiful people like that. But the most tangible, the most immediate benefit that I got from being able to interact with strangers in real life
Hmm.
was that I didn't need dating apps, and so I could easily meet a lot of interesting potential partners. And at some point in my life, I made use of that freedom. I made heavy use of that freedom, almost excessive use of that freedom. And I wanted to pass that on. At that time, I didn't really connect it to me being Indian at all. I was not aware at that point of any specific challenge that arises from being Indian. As I said, at that point, I still saw myself as this kind of isolated singleton in the world.
Hmm.
I didn't really feel like I was Indian. I didn't have a so strong sense of identity back then. I was just a human looking for connection. And after figuring it out for myself and realizing how ignorant most people are about the value that lies in this skill, I started exploring ways to transmit it to others. I just started a small WhatsApp group and then a meetup group where I said, here, single people can meet and I'll be there to help you learn the skill of just talking to strangers in real life, right?
Hmm.
What a basic thing, the most natural thing in the world, but most people have forgotten about it. So here I am every Wednesday. You can come, and there's a specific place in Berlin where we'd meet. And then 4 or 5 people just started showing up, and they were all German except for one. One was actually from Nepal. And we started going out regularly. And since I was the guy who was always there, and I was the guy who was announcing it, I just transitioned into that role of being the coach in that situation.
Hmm.
And also, since I had already found a girlfriend at that point, or I was in several relationships
Yeah.
successively. I was not necessarily going out too much and actively approaching new people, but I was just watching those guys. And I started enjoying the process of watching them very closely and writing up notes after each session where I gave every participant a few paragraphs of feedback. And that was the starting of my coaching career. At some point, I thought, hey, this is fun. And I started a challenge where I said, I'm going to do this every day for 2 weeks, maybe even for a month. And so I found some WhatsApp group where people were hanging out who are into personal development, a lot of single guys. And just said, hey guys, you can come to this specific point and I'll be there every day at the same time. You can start joining me and get free coaching. And I got them to come there. And one of them at some point said, hey, this is really valuable. I want to give you something. And they gave me 20 euros. And that was my first paid coaching session. And that's when I started dreaming of becoming a coach. And then more and more Indians started coming to me. I just ran these meetups and realized that 20% or 30 or 40% of the people that came were Indians or South Asian origin.
Yeah.
And obviously that's because I had that inside of me. And maybe it's also because the way I look, maybe it's because of the way I speak. I was just attracting those people. And as I attracted them, I started realizing more and more that the main reason that I had struggles overcoming social anxiety and learning how to talk to attractive women in real life was my own Indian background. I started kind of psychoanalyzing myself in that time. And by seeing the problems that these Indian dudes had that came here, I saw more and more of the same problems in myself. And at some point, I started talking about those problems. It was not easy for me, but I just said, I'm just going to start talking about it. It's very difficult. My household probably doesn't approve if I put this out, but I'm just going to do it anyways. And a lot of people responded to that. And I realized I was not alone. I was actually not alone.
Hmm.
First time, I felt like there are lots of people in the world who have similar problems. And that was thanks to me coming out on social media, talking about my inner demons. And suddenly I had 50,000 followers on Instagram, almost all of them Indians, who basically said, hey, we feel similar. We feel like that too. And that's when I started niching down and saying, I'm just going to specialize on people from the Indian background because
Hmm.
I'm one of the only ones who understands that problem very well, being
Yeah.
a bridge, being in the middle between the Western and the Indian culture.
I have a funny question for you. Arranged marriage or love marriage? What's your stance?
Personally, I thought about arranged marriage for a while, and after seeing the options that I had, it was not appealing to me. For me, it was clear that my family was not going to be able to find the kind of partner that I would like to marry. Maybe this was also a bit premature because I didn't see too many partners that they proposed, but they proposed a few, right? They proposed 5 to 10 people, and some of them I even met. And I just knew that this was not going to work because they were looking in a completely different direction. And I see this a lot with my clients too, especially those that move abroad. And oftentimes the family doesn't even know exactly who that person is anymore because there's so much has changed
Yeah.
and so much cultural shifts have happened. And I think it was the same for me. My family in that sense doesn't really know who I am. And when I realized that, I said, okay, I personally have to make sure that I find a way to get a love marriage. But I know a lot of people for whom it's completely different because their family is very well connected. Their family has a proven track record of making really good matches happen. And if you're in a family like that, I think arranged marriage is one of the best things in the world. It can just take so much headache away from life if you know that you can rely on your parents to find you a suitable, matching, compatible partner.
Yeah.
There's only one big issue with it is it's it's taking a bit of a challenge out of life, which is not necessarily a good thing, because that challenge for me ended up becoming the main obstacle that I had to climb in order to become who I am, in order to become stronger.
Yeah.
If I didn't have that obstacle, life would have been almost a bit too easy. Maybe I would have found another obstacle, but I'm glad that this obstacle was in my way and that I had to learn how to become really good socially because that led me to all the other success and all the other projects in my life, really. And I see a lot of people who lean back a little bit into the comfort of arranged marriage. And then if they don't have a lot of challenge in their work because they are smart and they make money easily by doing something that doesn't take them too much energy, then there's no challenge left. And if there's no challenge, you can't really grow and you won't really turn into the best version of yourself. So that's one big issue I do see with arranged marriage. But as long as you have other challenges in life, and usually people do have challenges, if you actually see those challenges, accept them fully, and choose to not just pass them, but actually take them seriously, dive in, and become really good at whatever you're doing, then you will not have a lack of challenge in life.
That makes sense. I feel like arranged marriages are cool in their own way. Um, but the thing is, if somebody, let's say, wanted to initially pursue, um, dating and try to find someone by themselves, but then they never put in the work, they got lazy or they just like didn't go out there, they got overwhelmed, things like that. Then that's a little sad because now you're taking the cop out option. You're not, you know, you're not really kind of finding the edge. You're not really putting yourself out there. You're not really facing your fears. And that's not really good. So I think to each unto their own. But if you're somebody who wants love marriage and you're not putting yourself out there and going for this, that's a cop out option. Can't be doing that.
Absolutely. And I used to also think that it's very sad, but nowadays I think, yeah, it's just a choice people make,
Yeah.
and some people don't admit it. They don't want to say it out loud that they actually want to do an arranged marriage.
Yeah.
But if you are not putting in the action to make a love marriage happen, then you want an arranged marriage.
Mm,
You have to accept this, and that takes a little bit of humility to accept that you're just not bothered enough
yeah.
and that you don't care enough or care that much about having a love marriage. But it's totally fine. I mean, yeah, not everyone is like me where they say, yeah, I really need to make a love marriage happen, otherwise my life will be kind of really bad.
Yeah.
But if you are like that, and if you do think that your life is not gonna be very enjoyable if you get the wrong partner and you just end up in a marriage that you don't even want, well, then I think it just takes a day of sitting down with yourself, being very honest, and looking the harsh reality in the eye that you need to change. You need to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I help people do now. Just getting to that point where they realize that they need to transform.
Hmm.
And obviously you can, but you have to want it. You have to want it really bad.
Makes sense. I'm gonna move away from this controversial topic because I know a lot of people have like strong opinions on love marriage or arranged marriage. And I'm not saying I'm against this or that. Neither is Akil. We're just saying if you choose one, make sure you put in the effort to go in that direction. But I am intrigued a little bit more about what you mentioned about how being Indian American, or keep saying Indian American, but Indian abroad, all right? Indian abroad. What are some of those like cultural elements that you would say are kind of deterring them into getting into dating, having like successful relationships and stuff? Because personally, I've kind of lived in a few different cities in the US and mainly within the state of Texas. So Dallas, Austin, where Dallas is where my family home is, and Austin is where I went to college. And kind of seeing different groups, getting to learn more about people, and I was like, yeah, man, like a lot of times, for some reason, maybe because of some aspects in the way that we were raised, we are not able to put ourselves out there and maybe show our full personality to people. And it takes a lot of kind of like effort, kind of like doing it multiple times, just putting yourself out there to like get rid of that. I'm curious, what are some things that you noticed um, about how maybe because of the cultural aspect, a lot of people are not able to um, they put themselves out there, show their full self to people.
Yeah. So ultimately, I would trace it back to an emphasis on stability and unity, which is hard to organize. I mean, people are different, and if you want to keep a group of people together, working, collaborating, you need strict rules and you need a certain conformism. And I think that's something that's overemphasized in the Indian culture, especially when you come over here, where creativity and breaking out of the old ways is very, very valuable, very appreciated. For me, there were so many rules in my childhood that some of them were really valuable, some of them were very, very helpful, but some of them were restricting my thinking very heavily. For example, me being in that position where I was mixed, I was not free to really ask my questions about Indian culture. When I asked something or criticized or questioned something, I would get into trouble. So I just learned to suppress the questions, suppress the free thought,
Hmm.
and became a habit. And that became a habit that seeped over in all areas of my life. And then at work, I would not be fully saying what I thought. At school, I would not be saying exactly what I thought because I had been taught that saying exactly what I think can get you into trouble. And so I think that's the root of a lot of Indians not being able to communicate very freely and very confidently.
Yeah.
Because when you're not saying what you actually think, it's a hassle. It's a drag to communicate because you have to make up something. You have to put on a facade that's so exhausting. It's not fun.
Hmm.
You want to do it for long.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you say like putting on a facade, I feel like a lot of Indians living abroad, they kind of understand this because they do this code switching thing with people, but not just code switching, they're also changing the part of themselves. They're showing a certain side of themselves and they're not able to show the other side, they feel like. And I feel like that puts a lot of like weight on you because my this person is really close to me. They don't really know this whole other side of me. And it feels like I'm kind of cheating them in a way. It feels like I'm being inauthentic.
Exactly. And people can sense that. And it's not just that it won't be fun for you, but
Yeah,
also people don't really vibe with that. And then if you
yeah,
don't get the results you want, then you're kind of locked in your own world, not able to connect, not able to have fun going out. And so I think it's super important for Indians to look at those
hmm,
shadow sides, all those things that they suppress.
yeah,
And obviously, the urge to connect and also the urge to date, to find a partner is one of those things that is often very suppressed. And
mm,
so that's part of my work to just make people look at that urge, also that sexual drive, and integrate it and start actually finding a way to own that. And that was a big journey for me because one of the things my family and my Indian mother especially would do is whenever there was something sexual happening in our youth, a movie scene
yeah,
or someone kissing in the streets, right? She would always give us a very intense negative emotion. Gee, don't look at that. Eyes held shut by her hands.
yeah,
So that's something that I learned, and a lot of Indians learn that, yeah, unmarried couples, it's just something that's not supposed to be happening.
yeah,
But if you want to find a love marriage, then at some point you'll have to be an unmarried couple, at least for a little bit of time. So that's a big conflict to resolve. And I don't really know what the ultimate way of thinking about that is. I mean,
yeah,
I should say that I'm not in favor of a very modern hookup-y dating culture.
Yeah.
So I still need to figure out together with my clients what the best approach is here, really, and that's what I'm doing continuously.
Mm. There's a problem on both sides and technically on opposite ends of the spectrum. One culture, Western culture, is kind of way more casual, a lot of like non-committal kind of relationships that are kind of ruining households, I feel like. And on the other side, there's maybe more traditional ways of thought where very community oriented, very rule based kind of a thing. And even it has its own issues. But luckily, Achill has a solution. Maybe. What have you found to be kind of some solutions maybe for Indians who are living abroad, who maybe are facing some of these issues that we mentioned about not being able to show their full self, things like that, not being able to be confident. What helps? How can they fix it?
I would actually say that I have a pretty good solution, and I have been able to take the best of both worlds. And the underlying philosophy would be to go in and say, hey, if I want a relationship, if I want a long-term relationship, then let me actually fully own that. And most Indians living abroad do want a relationship. And they're presented with a dating culture that doesn't necessarily support that, and where they feel like, oh, most people are not very committed, most people don't really want a relationship. And instead of just following suit, they could say, okay, that's what's going on out there, but I'm going to offer something very different. And what they will find then by owning that position, they will actually attract a lot of people who are also quite upset with the current realities of dating in the West, and who
Mm,
actually want a long-term relationship with a stable partner who's actually got his shit together in life. And so I see a unique opportunity for Indians because they can offer that real strong shoulder. They can offer that stability. They can offer that pragmatism also, that focus on career, that material success that a lot of people, a lot of men in the West can't really offer. And if you just get over the insecurity of being Indian, being brown, being too short, being too fat, all of that doesn't really matter. No one really cares what color your skin is, but people care if you're obsessed with that and if you blame lack of success on something like that. And so if you overcome that insecurity, then you have a lot of value in the dating market of the West as an Indian abroad. And then it's
mm,
just about finding a way to show that. And dating
yeah.
apps are not the best for that. That's why I focus on offline confidence, because there you can actually show your personality and show the things that you can work on.
Yeah.
Show your character, show your communicative strength, show your storytelling, instead of showing your body, which is something you can only change up to a certain extent.
That makes sense. Now for one of the kind of like final questions that I wanted to ask you, is regarding this one quote that I found on Instagram, right? Um, they say that the best dating advice is self-improvement, where you are able to understand yourself as a person, where you're able to know where you're going and have fun while doing it. And that in itself makes you such a confident, fully developed person that you're able to communicate with others, you're able to connect with others, and you're able to um, build those like deeper connections with people. And so when people say work on yourself, right? What do you think they are meaning by that? And I want maybe three quick tips that men in general or Indians living abroad, maybe working in like the tech industry, something like that, that they can work on to kind of improve themselves as like overall people that might help them in their dating journey as well.
Yeah. First of all, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Personal development is the best dating advice. It's just something that almost sounds a bit cliche and not too exciting. And everyone's like, oh, damn, then I have to do a lot of work. That's
Hmm.
going to take some time. Yeah, there's no way around that for sure. But I think it's important to understand that working on oneself includes working on one's communication skills. You cannot work on yourself and just go to the mountains and meditate for years and expect the perfect wife to come along.
Hmm.
Right. So I think that's the misconception that a lot of people succumb to, where they say working on yourself just means working on your career and getting rich and getting ripped, and then it's going to happen. Yeah, for some people it happens, but for some it still doesn't happen because working on a tech career, for example, might get you further and further away from connecting with the feminine. And that's what happened in my life. I mean, I was working on myself. I was getting really good at economics and I was, you know, getting successful by social standards, but I still didn't meet the right partner because I just didn't have the tools to connect to the feminine side. And so
Yeah.
that is part of personal development. It's an important part of personal development. And if you don't learn that, then yes, at some point you're going to get really successful and wealthy, and then you will actually attract people, but not necessarily the right people. You will attract people who like you for the resources that you accumulated, but not necessarily for the person you are and the person that you were before you had those resources. So I would definitely say one of the three tips should be work on yourself for sure, but also put yourself out there and accept yourself the way you are right now and give others a chance to get to know you as you are right now. Because if you're just working on yourself and always want to get better before you show yourself somewhere out there, well, then that means you're not really accepting yourself, and no one else is going to accept you as you are. And then
Yep.
you will not find that deep love that requires accepting a person even before they're formally, officially, clearly, visibly successful. The second tip I would say is have a mission, have a really exciting mission for your life. And if you can't say that in a sentence right now, if it takes more than 2 seconds for you to think of your mission statement, you have a problem. And it's not so difficult to solve this. You just need to sit down for maybe a day, maybe two, maybe three. And this is the most important thing in your life. So you should block the next weekend and just say, I'm going to think about what my mission is and finally write it down in 2 sentences. And that's going to give you so much direction. And it should be something that's very challenging because that's where you're going to be forced to develop into the best version that you can imagine. I just said at some point, I'm going to try to do the most difficult thing that I can somehow still imagine doing. And
Mm.
for me, it was building a company. That was like the ultimate challenge for me. And I knew some people haven't done this before, so I can do this. I can do this too. Yes, it's the most difficult thing I can imagine. Yes, it's something I can't really accomplish right now with the person I am right now, but I'm going to transform into the person that can do it easily. And that's giving my life direction. And that is also giving me a lot of direction that is seen by the female gender and seen as attractive by the female in the world. And let's see if I can come up with a third tip.
I know I put you on the spot, but I'm loving the tips that are coming, you know?
There's one more. That's the fundamental principle that I would advise you follow when you actually approach someone, when you actually go up to someone and start an interaction with a stranger. A lot of people say, what should I do? What should I say? How should I think? I don't know what to say. All of that doesn't matter. What matters is what's your attitude in that moment. And the simple attitude that I would recommend you take is, what can I give? Instead of taking something, because that's always what makes people feel creepy when they feel like, I'm trying to get this woman and trying to get her time. I'm trying to get her into my apartment pull. And that's just always going to feel creepy. So instead, in the first few seconds, the thought should just be, hey, what can I give? And what you can always give is attention and human connection. And that already is very valuable, very rare in this world. Everyone is stuck to their phone. Everyone knows that this is a problem. And still, no one actually proactively offers real world connection. You can be the one who says, no, I'm going to break this pattern. I'm going to do what no one else does. I'm going to give human connection and attention for free to people that cross my way. And then when you do that, people actually appreciate it when it comes from that real giving place. And that way, it doesn't matter what you're going to say. It's just an energy and a vibe that will be appreciated and that will kickstart the interaction in the right direction.
Okay. I absolutely love this conversation. And I had a lot more kind of ideas, stuff that I wanted to kind of talk about, but already like the topics that we covered took a long time. And I'm hoping to have you back on the show sometime in a future episode. And really appreciate the value that you gave to all the audience. And so for whoever who's in the audience who might be interested, do you want to kind of give them a picture of your business, what you do, where they can find you, social media, things like that?
Yeah, I'll make it real short because I also have to jump off in a minute.
Yeah.
I have an Instagram account. It's called Conscious Confidence. And I also have a website where I offer more advanced coaching programs specifically for Indians living abroad. And that's called Indian Confidence, indianconfidence.com. And next big event is actually a webinar that I offer. It's going to be happening almost every Wednesday for the next few months. And that's where I take people on a 1 hour live coaching where I actually give them real world advice on how to interact. And in some of those webinars, I will actually have people go out while they're on the webinar, and I'll be there to observe and audit their communication style and give them feedback. So I think that's a really good opportunity for people to get to know me more.
That makes sense, man. Happy to have you on the show.
Lydia, all the best. See you.
Later, man.